From my very first weightlifting session to then standing on the Olympic stage took me a little over 6 years. And I'll say this up front, that this timeline that I share probably does more harm than good with the lifters I share this with, because my personal timeline isn't your timeline. And if you're using that as a measuring stick, for example, then you're setting yourself up to feel behind your whole weightlifting career. So today, from what I've seen and experienced with coaching lifters in over 28 countries, I'm going to give you the real answer as to how long it takes to actually get good at weightlifting, being the actual phases, the milestones that mark each one, and then those factors that either speed up or slow down this process. Now, before we get down to what it takes to get good at weightlifting, we need to define what good actually is, because I know this from first experience. Good is a moving target. One day, good actually means just simply being able to perform the lifts. To then, a couple years in, it turns into a bodyweight snatch. And for some of you, good actually means being competitive with other lifters on the platform, potentially standing on a podium. So instead of giving one vague answer, I'm going to break this down into 4 stages of a career so you can see where you're roughly sitting at. Phase 1, I would call the learning curve. And this roughly runs from your first ever session to up to 12 months into the sport. This is where, of course, you actually learn how to perform the movements, being the snatch, the clean, the jerk, squats, pulls, and its other variations. And eventually getting enough skill to be able to string together a proper weightlifting program, which I would say is a milestone in itself. And for those watching this video, I assume you already will know, it is a slow and awkward start into learning the weightlifting movements. There is a real initial hump you need to get over, and it is the feeling of looking like an absolute goose to people around you who seem to know what they're doing while you're there with very light weights, awkwardly, feeling uncoordinated, trying to find your feet. Every single one of us went through it. I went through it. Lifters that I coach who compete internationally now have went through it. Now, this doesn't mean you're not built for the sport, but this is just the price you pay to get started. And here's something that I would actually encourage in this phase that some may think or try to delay until later in their career. And that is getting on the competition platform. Now, this isn't to lift heavy or necessarily compete with anyone, but you're there to learn how the competition actually works, the warm-up room, the clock, the 3 attempts, and lifting in front of 3 judges and a small audience. Getting comfortable on the platform early, while the weights are still light and the stakes are low, can pay off for the rest of your career. And most lifters who do this come off the platform having genuinely enjoyed it and want to do it again. It may be stressful, but I would compare it to riding a roller coaster. And having been through this and wanting to do it again is going to do more for your longevity in the sport than anything else. And in my case, I did my first competition 4 weeks into weightlifting. I barely knew what I was doing. I muscled most of my attempts, and considering it was Halloween, I was wearing a Mario costume, and I loved the experience. And throughout the first 12 months of my career, I competed a total of 12 times. Nothing overly ambitious and heavy, but more so just enjoying the experience. Now, phase 2, which is a fun one, the newbie gains phase. And this is roughly years 1 through 3. And this is where the easiest progress comes. Once you've learnt the movements well enough so you can perform a full weightlifting program, this is where the PRs can seamlessly just start to roll in every session. It becomes the norm as you begin training in this phase. And this is where you can build some serious training momentum. 2 things are happening here. One being your technique and overall efficiency is improving rapidly. And at the same time, your strength is climbing quickly, particularly if you're new when it comes to structured loading for strength training. And when both of these curves are steep at the same time, then progress is of course going to feel exponential in this phase. And I would say enjoy this phase genuinely. Ride the wave of momentum, but get your technical habits right while the weight is still forgiving and not overly heavy just yet. Because the habits you build here will be the ones that are going to carry you over later into your weightlifting career. And if you're not paying attention to this, you will then have to try to unlearn certain things in your weightlifting. Now, of course, all things come to an end, as does this phase. And as these curves start to flatten, those PRs that were once coming every single session turn into months. They turn into end of training block PRs. There's nothing wrong here, you've just arrived at the next phase. And I would call this next phase the milestone phase, which is roughly years 3 to 5, and where you have to become a little more strategic with your goals and exactly how to achieve them, which can be anywhere from a bodyweight snatch to a national champion, depending on the lifter and their priorities outside of the gym. And the character of progress changes here completely. In phase 2, you are adding tens of kilos a year across every single lift. And in this phase, you're fighting for single digits over the year potentially. A 5% increase in your total over a year of training in this phase can be considered as good progress depending on the lifter's trajectory. And you need to hear that because this phase is exactly where most lifters get led astray. This is where discipline, a long-term vision, and genuinely enjoying the process is a must. I have seen over my years many promising lifters who can't handle the grind of weightlifting. So then they start coach hopping or looking for magic programs or bullets to fix all of their perceived problems. And then they can either injure themselves with a immature and impatient approach, or they just pack it in and give it up entirely, looking for that next shiny thing that looks appeasing to do instead. This phase, for those lifters with real goals in weightlifting, I would consider this the great separator between those that do and those that don't. And next, phase 4 is the competitive phase, which for most lifters sits between 5 to 10 years and beyond, depending on how long you're in the sport. This here is qualifying totals, national and international level lifting. And the ones that actually do haven't been the most talented ones that I've actually coached. They're the ones that simply stayed in the game long enough. As I said before, you of course need to love this sport in order to stay in it long term. Now, this is where your personal timeline may bend those averages that I just discussed, because there are 5 factors which bring these timelines forward or backwards, sometimes by years. Factor 1 is training frequency, and not training frequency alone. For example, someone training 3 sessions a week for 3 years is roughly 450 sessions total, where a lifter training 5 sessions a week is going to hit that 450 session mark in under 2 years. But it's worth noting that 5 hit and miss sessions a week that you can't even recover from don't even compare to 3 to 4 quality sessions a week. And sustainable progress is the aim at the end of the day. Now, factor 2 is your training history. If you're coming, say, from powerlifting or from general strength training into this, then of course, you're going to fly through those initial strength requirements needed, and your first wall you're likely going to hit is going to be on the technical side. And if you're, say, coming from gymnastics or dance or sports where there's a real movement standard here, then typically it's going to be the inverse effect, where you're going to pick up the movements quite fast, but you're going to spend a lot of your time building that base of strength in order to continue that progress long term. Neither is better. It's just a plateau in different areas. Now, factor 3 is coaching. A lifter with real coaching from day one compared to, say, a lifter who is self-taught from YouTube can be separated by years of progress, purely because one of them spent years reinforcing technical errors unchecked, which will eventually need to be unlearned in order to continue that progress. And unlearning is slower than learning. Every session or month or year you're out there training bad habits without someone to check them, the harder it is then going to be to reverse in future. Having a coach like I have always had since day one, if you want real progress on weightlifting, is a necessity. And if you can see the description of this video as a shameless plug, I coach lifters every day 1-to-1 and in my Raising Minimums team program. So if you need help with your progress, be sure to check out my links below. Now, factor 4 is your training age. And I want to be direct here because a huge portion of those watching are either 30, 35, 45 plus. These phases don't just disappear if you get into the sport later in life. Recovery sessions may take longer and you may have more considerations when it comes to doing the lifts. And your recoverable sessions per week may be less than someone starting off a little younger. But the skill involved and your ability to learn the movements hold up a lot better than you may think. I coach masters lifters who are out there hitting PRs 6, 7, 8 years into the sport. Some well into their 40s, 50s, and 60s still hitting PRs. So starting at 40 doesn't mean you missed out on the sport. You can get much stronger than you currently are and have a blast on the competition platform. And I've even seen masters weightlifters go on to have much more fulfilling careers than elite lifters at the Olympic Games. It's not all about gold medals and world records at the end of the day. And factor 5, the last one, is consistency, which is the most important by far. The lifter who trains 3 sessions a week uninterrupted for 5 years is going to beat the lifter who trains hard 5 sessions a week for 6 months, takes a few months off, then comes back, goes hard at it again, but is just patchy with their consistency. Weightlifting is a marathon, not a sprint, and training momentum over time, uninterrupted and uninjured, is the real key to making progress. So for the real answer when it comes to learning the sport of weightlifting, roughly around a year to learn the sport properly, and then those newbie gains from 2 to 4 years depending, then a longer rewarding fight for those big milestones for those years beyond that. Now, as I said earlier, having started this sport over a decade ago now, and now giving everything that I know and learnt to my athletes. If you're out there doing this alone and want to work close and personal or inside a team, there are 2 options below that you're welcome to check out and get your training on track. But also in the comments, let me know how long you've been in this sport for and when you got started in your weightlifting journey. And for those out there that want to go a bit deeper into their weightlifting journey, YouTube has suggested 2 videos here which will help you further.